My name is Matt Smith. On 9/11, I was in the military. I was in the Special Forces qualification course. As a matter of fact, I was just coming to the end of the qualification course.
I was in the 8th grade. I lived in Alaska with my family.
I had just become an officer 3 months prior to that, and I was at training.
I was in a bad place of my life. Debauchery, truly a useless person. First year grad student and completely obsessed with myself and nothing else.
Found out about when I got home. I saw it on TV because somebody's parents at our school didn't want us knowing about it, and so we weren't told about it until after we got home.
I was a young E5 buck sergeant, infantry team leader. I was stationed over in Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, and my squad was just getting ready to do a raid on a village. We were practicing some mountain training.
The morning of 9/11, I was on patrol, and I received a phone call asking if I had heard about a plane hitting the World Trade Center. I had not. At the same time, my headquarters called me in, said come to headquarters immediately. And back then we had pagers, and I was also a pararescue specialist in New York. And they had paged me 911, which means respond to, we call the base to section, respond to the section. By that time, one of the towers had come down and they issued a ground stop, so nobody was flying. The only people who were flying at that moment were the fighter jets. So helicopter was out of the question, so we were trying to figure out how we were going to get downtown.
When you're in the Special Forces qualification course as a medic, they select a high incident city for you to go and train in. And when they gave me a choice of cities to go to, I selected New York City. And so in 2001, I did all of my medical and paramedic training at a fire department in New York.
And around 4 in the morning, somebody woke us up saying, they were yelling and screaming like, they bombed New York, they bombed New York. And because we're in the field, we had absolutely no contact with what was going on. All we knew what was going on the radio.
And I was at my desk when at the bottom, the little blotter said a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center and that it was on fire. So I clicked on it, and this is like early live streaming, and there I had this little box, and I watched live that second plane slam into the buildings. And I was riveted, just like everyone else. I couldn't move, I couldn't pull away. And I was sitting there thinking about what I was going to be wearing to this next party, like, what jeans, what affliction shirt, something terrible. And then I watched Americans look outside a window that was shattered or melted and decide if they were going to jump to their death or continue to burn alive. And I could not have felt more frustrated as to who I am.
I worked at a hospital in New York and learned how to work in a high-paced emergency room there, and developed a lot of skills and met some of the most amazing people in my life, and most memorably of which was one of my chief trainers, a guy that I rode around on the ambulance with, was a guy by the name of Ricardo Quinn. Rick Quinn was one of just a handful of EMS providers that responded to the towers when the incident happened, and he was one of just a handful of EMS that were in the towers when they fell. Heroically gave his life and ran into a tower to save people, not knowing what could happen.
The second plane hit the second tower in real time, thinking I was watching a replay of the first plane hitting the tower. And so as a collective, we all realized we were watching the second plane hit the tower and realized we were under attack. Some of the guys in my class had family and cousins and uncles that died in the towers that day, and they were watching that happen in real time.
I was in the Army for about 5 years at that time, and up until then, we were practicing for things like trench warfare and fighting in the jungles and stuff like that. But nothing was able to get us prepared for that happening. It was definitely a rough day. Everybody there kind of got jacked up and pumped up and ready to get one back for America.
Just not knowing what was going on. I think I was so far removed from the real world, being like a middle school kid. But we did go to school like it was a normal day, and then they brought in the TVs on the big cart and they wheeled them into the classroom.
They dropped us off at the South Street Seaport helipad, and we humped it onto the pile. By the time we got there, it was about getting dark, but everything was on fire. Everything was still burning. It was as bad as you might think it was worse.
And I walked down to the recruiter's office on 9/11. I couldn't even find a recruiter to talk to. Finally got somebody to talk to on 9/12, and ultimately became a Green Beret.
All the way through Jersey, you should see the clouds from just those two towers burning. And as I come back after the weekend, everything was still burning. So for almost a month, you could see a reminder of that event happening, which not many people, I think, know about.
So we found the nearest firefighter, red helmet, said, "Where do you want us?" And there were 12 of us, and in our fatigues, and we had done harnesses, and because we know we'd be doing some rope work. So he said, "Go wherever you think you might." So we split up, and we spent the next week, well, up till Sunday, on the pile looking for survivors.
But it was one of those times where, I just brought everybody together and really taught me that the guys around me are to be trusted, and it gave us a real reason to start training.
That all started then and there. Me watching live while Americans had to decide the worst kind of two options for their fate.
We got sorted and went out to deploy immediately after that.
When I was deployed, I would often think of Rick Quinn and think about how heroic that guy was and how selfless that guy was. And so a lot of times in really awful situations, it kind of grounded me. So it was both a wonderful and horrific experience for me. While you're sitting around on 9/11, kind of give it some deep thought and do those heroes a service and go back and do some deep reflection and look through some of those names, some of those firefighters and those EMS guys and the soldiers that that gave all in defense of this nation and its citizens, because there's a lot of good men and women who lost their lives in a very selfless way, and that's what I try to concentrate on 9/11. I encourage everybody else to.